Hello, world. So, today I want to talk about, can we predict the Bitcoin cycle top? So, there's a few things I've been working on the past few months. I have played around with different charts, looked through lots of data across the board for Bitcoin, and I came up with 7 signals that I think are pretty good indicators. A few of these signals other folks have talked about. Some of them I don't think I've heard a lot of people talk about, but either way, I have my own spin on things. And overall, I think they're fairly good signals. Again, I have not used any of these signals myself. I just found those signals by looking at historical patterns for the last few Bitcoin cycles that we've had. So we're currently in cycle 4 of the Bitcoin cycle. We're getting close to the end of the bull phase. The question is, can we predict the Bitcoin cycle top? Now, these 7 signals I'm not going to talk about today. Over the course of the next few weeks, I'll slowly talk about each signal. So I kind of want to play this as a game. And the way I want to do this is to talk about each signal as I see the signal starting to flash in the Bitcoin market. So if I see one of my signals get triggered, then I'll just make a video about it and then reveal what that signal is. So this is going to be a game week by week to kind of see if these signals actually hold true and we're able to predict what the Bitcoin cycle top will be. Now, that being said, for this video, I'll focus on the first signal. And the first signal is important because this is actually the weakest signal in a way, but it's the first signal because it allows us to identify at a high level around what month or months, so to speak, we should expect the Bitcoin cycle to top out based on historical patterns. Again, this is based on historical patterns, right? Now, if the pattern flips and it changes this time around, if we break pattern, that's a different story. We'll figure that out when we cross that bridge. But for right now, this is based on historical patterns. So signal number 1 is pretty obvious. It's just patterns based on the Bitcoin 4-year cycle. This is something most people are probably aware of by now. If you're not, this is what it looks like. One of the things I found really interesting, and I laid it out this way because each year of the Bitcoin 4-year cycle coincides with the US elections, which is I find very interesting. I don't know if that was intentional when Satoshi, built this. I don't think we'll ever know, but it's really interesting how this aligns. So essentially in the US midterms, that year aligns with the Bitcoin bear market. The US pre-election year, that aligns with when Bitcoin typically bottoms out. The US election year, that typically aligns with the Bitcoin halving year. And then the US post-election year, that typically aligns with the Bitcoin cycle top. So if you notice, for the Bitcoin cycle top, this is the US post-election year. The elections were last year, obviously, and this is the post-election year. And as you can see, based on historical patterns, we're expecting the top to be this year, 2025. Okay. Now, another thing I find really interesting here that I did want to call out is also the fact that for the Bitcoin cycle bottom, I pulled up the previous cycle bottom dates. So in 2015, Bitcoin bottomed out January 14th. But then in the 2018 year, it bottomed out December 15th. So even though I have the year 2019 here, Bitcoin actually bottomed out a month before the year 2019. And subsequently in 2023, Bitcoin bottomed out in November of 2022. So these 2 years, even though it says 2019, 2023, the bottom dates were slightly a month or two prior to that year itself. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If we keep offsetting by a few months, I might have to adjust this cycle dates. But for now, we'll see how that plays out. Like I said, we're in 2025 and we're expecting the Bitcoin cycle to top out this year based on historical patterns. So when do we think this could top out? Now, I have a more detailed chart here. And what you can see here, I laid out the cycles, cycle 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're currently in cycle 4. That's why it's in yellow. What I did, I took each of the dates where Bitcoin bottomed out. Again, these are all approximates, because there's a few times where Bitcoin actually did a double top. What I did was I counted the first top because I consider the first top to be the real top, because in the moment, you don't know if a double top might happen or not. So you can't really base it off of the double top. Even though the double top might go a little bit higher than the first top, I still think it's safer to go with the first top. Okay, so what do we have? In cycle 1, Bitcoin topped out. I really want you to pay attention to this because I find this really interesting. I'm a numbers and data guy, and this is really fascinating to me. If you notice here, Bitcoin bottomed out in 2015 in January, December in 2018, November in 2022. Notice the pattern here. Even though these were off by 4 years each, the month kept going down by 1. Like, to me, that is just absolutely mind-blowing. Like, this whole Bitcoin thing just seems so mathematical to me that it just really blows my mind. So that's the first thing. Here's where it gets really crazy. So if you look at the dates where Bitcoin topped out, again, we have the same pattern. Each cycle, even though they're 4 years apart, Bitcoin outside of the cycle 1, because again, I keep going back to the fact that cycle 1 was a little bit funny. So if we start from cycle 2, Bitcoin topped out in December, and then in the next cycle topped out in November. Again, notice the pattern. It's going down by a month, even though these are 4 years apart. That's crazy. Absolutely insane. So if we take that pattern, okay, this is just going off of predictive analysis. Logically, math is telling me Bitcoin should possibly top out in October because each cycle, it's been going down by a month, even though these cycles are 4 years apart. So based on historical patterns, my guess would be October is when Bitcoin should top out. Now, in terms of when, an actual date, this is me just taking a shot at this. This is in no way saying this is the exact day Bitcoin is going to top out. In fact, I do not think Bitcoin is going to top out October 8th. I think Bitcoin would top out slightly closer to either end of October or November. And there's other reasons behind that because of my other signals, which I'll be talking about in other videos, which I haven't talked about right now. But due to those other signals not being triggered yet, I think October 8th just seems really early to me. Again, maybe I'm doubting myself and this turns out to be right. I don't know. But this just seems really early. And you may be wondering, how did I even get this number? October 8th. So the October month, obviously, we got based on the pattern. But here's where things get even crazy. I took the halving date and counted the number of days from the bottom to the halving, and then from the halving to the Bitcoin cycle top for each and every Bitcoin cycle. What I found interesting here is the numbers, give or take, were plus or minus 530 days. And a few folks have talked about this, how the Bitcoin cycle seems to be roughly about 1,063, 64, 66, 68 days. Everybody has different counts on how many days it is slightly, but give or take, 1,060 days or so. And what I decided to do was take an average, and I said, let's take a nice average round number of 530 days as a safety, right? So I took 530 days, added it to the Bitcoin halving date of this cycle. That number came out to be October 8th. So that's how I got the October 8th date. Again, like I said, I don't think we're going to top out October 8th. I actually think this cycle will go on to, if I really had to take a guess, folks, I would say end of October into November sometime is when this will top out. Again, Bitcoin is funny. A lot could happen between now and October, quite frankly. But that will be my guess. So yeah, let me know what you think. Fascinating numbers here. I'm putting my neck on the line, putting it out there just to see how this plays out in terms of a first signal point that we could use to determine when Bitcoin could potentially top out. So in conclusion, if the 4-year cycle holds true, based on the historical patterns that we've just seen, then I think Bitcoin will top out, like I said, the end of October into early November sometime. So we'll see how that plays out. Thanks.